We're excited to have you, Josh. And we're going to talk about a story that you actually went through, and that is buying a home using a VA assumable loan. So, Josh, tell us a little bit about the story. What got you into this? And let's dive right in.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. Excited to share. Not only am I in the military, but I'm also a realtor on the side as well. And I'm on the Rexford group with Felicia Rexford. So I also am big into real estate investing and looking for my next property. Even when the market's crazy, I'm always looking for creative ways to get into the next property and to increase my portfolio. And so with the rates being as high as they are and coming out of the market we've been in the past year when rates were very low and we were spoiled, rates are going up. They've been up for a bit now. And that's reducing prices in home sales. So I'm thinking, hey, this might be an opportunity to buy my next property, but how can I do that in a way that I can make the numbers work? And so I came across a property that had advertised VA assumable loan. And so it's been a minute since I've seen that phrase. And so it got me thinking, hey, what does that entail? So that's where I started doing the research. And once I did and realized this is a possibility for me, since I am military, even though you don't have to be military to assume a loan, which we'll get into. I know you'll talk about it later, Bill, but that's how it kind of started. I saw a description for the VA assumable loan, and I said, hey, let me look into doing this because I think I can make it work.
So you're still in the military. Did you have a house prior to this one that you just purchased?
I did. This is, I have one home that I currently live in where I'm currently recording from. And then this is going to be the second home. My second home is this, the home that I'm going to be assuming the loan on.
Okay. But it will be your primary residence, which is one of the main aspects of doing a VA assumable loan, correct?
Exactly. It's actually in the same community, and I'm going to be making that my primary residence. So I'm in the process of moving right now. And after this call, I'm packing up stuff and moving across the street. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I love it that you're in this. Thank you for your service. We appreciate it. And, but being in the real estate business too, the VA benefits, being active duty, there's so many great things about that allow you to do something like this. And right now, it's so cool because the market, like you said, interest rates are so high right now. And let's talk a little bit about the advantages of somebody, actually a home buyer, coming in and trying to buy a property using the VA assumable loan. Talk about rates where you were looking at versus assuming somebody that already had a low rate.
So the biggest thing that everyone talks about, especially in our economy and when it comes to real estate, is rates. What's the rate? Oh, this is a high rate, low rate. That doesn't necessarily indicate if the house is going to be a good deal when you look at, from the investor side of things. But in assuming a loan, you can assume, you do assume the rate that seller had. So seeing what was out there, I was going to have the potential to assume rates lower than 4% going back to the past several years where rates have been around 3, anywhere from 2.5 to 3, 3.5, 4. I said, wow, that's a great deal compared to this market where we're hitting 6.5, 7%. Right. So that is a huge advantage that I keyed in on the first thing.
And then the lower closing costs as well. Once you go through that process, you have to pay a 0.5% VA funding fee. There's some exemptions for that, but that's a lot lower than a lot of programs out there. And there's not all the associated costs with the assumable loan. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. That was another huge advantage. And the funding fee, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe on your subsequent properties, it can be 1.5 plus, but with assumable loan, you're only around 0.5% of the VA funding fee, which was another benefit as well.
Yeah. And if it's a zero down payment on reusing your VA, it's going to be over 3% VA funding fee.
Yeah.
So it can make a difference, no doubt. So this is a pretty good program. So that's a good way. So let's jump back a little bit into what does a VA assumable mean? And essentially, just if you had to give a quick little definition of a VA assumable loan, what does that mean?
A quick definition would be you are overtaking the loan of the seller, taking their mortgage payment, their interest rate, and continuing on with the remaining loan balance. And you take that, you own the house at that point. That is a very simplified definition.
Very simplified.
Yep.
You're basically replacing, you'd have a buyer or a homeowner that owns a property with a VA. New buyer comes in, takes that VA loan that's existing, and then goes on with home ownership in that property. Talk about some of the like when you had to buy that house, let's talk about sale price versus loan amount and what that difference is, because some people are like, wow, let's get in and do this VA assumable loan. But there's some tricks to it, right? From the standpoint of sale price versus loan amount. How did that work out for you?
Yes, sir. So that's kind of the kicker in this case. So the catch-all is you're going to have to pay the difference between what the home sells for versus what the remaining loan balance is. So that's where I did my research up front before even placing an offer, and I asked the realtors, "Hey, what is the remaining loan balance?" Because if the difference is extreme, then you're going to owe essentially that as a down payment. So that is what you would be paying the seller, the difference of what they sell the house for versus what their loan balance is. That's the down payment. So that's where you also have to play in that factor of, how you're going to fund that part of it. But once you pay that to the seller, you assume the rest of the loan and carry on from there.
So let's take a quick example. So if somebody bought the house, let's say a veteran bought the house 4 years ago for $300,000 and they did 100% VA financing on that property. They got a loan for somewhere around $300,000. Over the last 4 years, home values have appreciated and gone up. Let's say now that house is worth $375,000. So someone coming in and trying to take on that loan, they would have to pay the difference between the new sale price of $375,000 versus the new loan balance, which is going to be less than 300 because it's been paid down a little bit. So they may need to come up with anywhere from $80,000 to $90,000 to make that difference up between sale price and loan amount.
Correct. And in my case, I'll disclose it was about a $60,000 difference from the loan balance to what the sale price was. And how I did that, shout out to Reina Gutierrez. She helped me out getting a HELOC. So I used the HELOC on my first property in order to take out money to close on the second property.
Yeah. And that's the difference. So, and you obviously are an investor. I know with Felicia, just the dynamo that she is too, and buying and totally investing in real estate. This is a way for you to grow your portfolio and
Absolutely.
utilize the equity. What did you do with the existing loan that you had on your current home?
So I had refinanced it over a year and a half ago. And then obviously I did the HELOC in order to get the second property. I'm moving out into my second property, and I'm going to be renting out my first property. I'll be doing that here starting next month.
Now, this is a good question, and this can happen. Do you have to qualify for an assumable loan? Did you have to go in and show them your income, your credit, all that stuff in order to qualify for this new home purchase?
Yes, the lender from the seller had to do all of that. So I had to submit all of my information to the seller's lender because I'm essentially dependent on their lender since I'm assuming their loan. That is the other part to this too, is that you're going to be assuming a loan with maybe a lender or company that you're not familiar with or haven't worked with before, and that's fine. But that is a part that I had to essentially go through is give them my information so they could qualify me for this assumable loan, make sure that I was still eligible with my VA benefits, etc.
Got that. And then another question that a lot of people will have is, do I have to be a veteran to assume a VA loan?
You do not have to be a veteran to assume a loan. However, a non-veteran assuming a loan will still have the seller's eligibility tied up. So, Bill, I don't know if you want to touch on that, but essentially that is one aspect mostly for the seller to be aware of. But long story short, you do not have to be a veteran to assume a VA loan.
Yeah, you don't. If anybody, a civilian can assume a VA loan as long as they prove that they have to. I'm going to go into another slide here real quick here. This is one thing that I want to show. So the requirements for home buyers to assume a VA loan, they've got to meet the lender's credit and income requirements. So in other words, you do have to qualify for it based on the lender that currently holds that mortgage that's going to be assumed, their income and credit requirements. And then they assume all the mortgage obligations. So whatever's left on that mortgage, the rate, the loan amount, the taxes, the insurance, all the stuff that's associated with that mortgage, they then also have to assume all that. And then, of course, they pay a funding fee to get it. But there's also one thing that I really think needs to be taken a look at is this is super important right here for a veteran that is selling their home to a civilian, and even a veteran as well. And that is release of liability. That's huge. You want to make sure that you get a release of liability during that transaction so that you are basically eliminated from the legal obligation on that loan. If you don't get the release of liability, you could potentially be still responsible if the new home buyer defaults. So make sure to get a release of liability. And then if you are a veteran, what you'll want to do, and you own that home and you're selling it, get a substitution of entitlement. That will allow you to get your entitlement back so that you can go out and buy another home. If a civilian buys that property, they can't do a substitution of entitlement because they don't have VA eligibility, and you would lose some buying power by basically leaving your entitlement with that house. If that loan gets paid off, then you get your entitlement back. But until that loan gets paid off, you're going to lose some of the buying power that you may have, maybe all of it, and you would not be able to use that VA loan as you had in the past. So be wary, be careful if you are a veteran selling your home to a civilian. So does that answer your question? I know that was a long
Absolutely.
answer. Yeah. But so now one other thing too, I know this can happen too, is a family member. Can a family member assume a VA loan? Are you familiar with that?
I believe so. I'm not sure though. I didn't look into that part, but I'm pretty sure they can. Am I correct?
They
Yep.
can, as long
Yep.
as they meet the financial requirements
Right.
associated with it. It's not a simple transfer, but they have to do it.
Okay.
Another question that some people talk about is in a divorce. Not that divorce is a good thing to happen, but it does happen. Can the ex-spouse assume the VA loan? And it's similar to what we talked about. If the ex-spouse is a civilian, they would basically be allowed to do that. Again, release of liability is important to get into that. And then you would lose your entitlement to go out and buy your next property if the ex-spouse is a civilian. So those are definitely some things to get educated on and be aware of what's going on if somebody does assume the loan. What was the hardest part for you, Josh, going through getting an assumable loan?
The hardest part throughout the whole process was the amount of contingencies involved because there were so many unknown variables. This was the first time this lender was doing an assumable loan. So there were a lot of confusing moments for the lender and a lot of parts they weren't sure of. Same thing for myself and for the realtor on the other end, how we were going to kind of lay out the timeline, what closing was going to look like, the different things that were required. Typically, in a home purchase of a VA loan, an appraisal is required, but we found out you don't need an appraisal on assumable loan. So there were certain things like that just, not that it was super difficult, but it definitely made the process a little longer, and it was a learning process at the end of the day. But
How long was the process for you?
just a little bit over 60 days to close, which we projected. We initially set it for 60 days. I think we closed closer to around 70 days. There were a couple hiccups at the end, but we worked through it and made it happen.
Yeah. And then in this market, 60 days is not a bad thing. In the previous market, when rates were like 2.5, 2.25, this would not even have been on the radar for a seller. So talk about how the market changed and why this is really coming into play a little bit more.
Well, going back to what we talked about in the beginning, the rates obviously is the thing that everyone focuses in on, and I think in this case, this could be a great option for first-time home buyers, especially looking for rates, or even second-time home buyers, whatever the case is, looking for a lower rate that's going to help their monthly payment. Again, it just comes back to what the down payment, the differences between the purchase price and the loan balance is going to be. But at the end of the day, it's a great option to get those lower rates in this market with higher rates.
So it may be actually a really good idea for somebody that is a move up buyer, or somebody that needs a little bit more space, and they have some equity in their current home that they might be able to meet that difference, which in your case, you kept your home and you used the equity from a home equity line of credit, which was awesome. That's a good way to do it. Um, how do they find a VA assumable property?
So that's where I did my research and started making calls to homes that were up for sale. I said, "Hey, is the seller willing to consider assumable loan?" Just because where I live, there's a very big military community. So, chances are that many people are selling their homes are military. It was a time of season where people are starting to move out. And so I said, "Hey, there might be opportunity here for folks to sell their home under assumable loan." So that's where I just started making calls and doing my research.
So did you call the seller's agent? Did you call, is that what you did?
Correct. Being a realtor, I was able to see on the MLS what's available, and I started making calls to agents. Some properties did advertise that they were willing to do an assumable loan. So that is even becoming more common now for properties to willingly advertise that as well. So anyone working with a realtor, that they should have access to see that.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, when they list their homes, they don't even think about that right now, but it can be such an advantage for the seller, particularly if it's another veteran coming in that can substitute their entitlement, come up with a down payment just like you. Now, did you substituted your entitlement for this property? Is that correct?
Absolutely. And that was
Yeah.
one of the last things that we did in terms of the process of signing that release of liability and then the substitution entitlement to make sure that the seller got their full entitlement back, because obviously they're military and they're moving on to their next location and they need that entitlement back for their next property.
So veteran to veteran is really good because you can get, from the seller standpoint, it works well for them because they can sell their home, they can get their entitlement back, release of liability, and not really lose the ability to use that loan again. And for the home buyer, you come in and you get a lower rate, a
Exactly.
much lower rate. I mean,
Yep.
in this market, you're saving probably, I'm guessing 3% minimum
Yep.
in rate, which is awesome.
Yep. I assumed the loan at 3.8%. So not too bad.
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
saving about
Yeah.
3%, somewhere in that
Yep.
range. So amazing. That's a lot of money
Yep.
when you, at the end of the day. And how about the term of the loan? In other words, if the home seller had been in the loan for 3 years, is your loan now 27 years?
That's a good question, Bill. I don't think I believe it is, right? Or am I wrong? It should be,
I,
it should continue on as far I'm tracking you, continue on with the loan as it was prior to being sold.
yeah, and
Yep.
that would be it. It's basically let me go back here. It goes along the line of this here. Is you're assuming all mortgage obligations.
Right.
So
Yep.
whatever that loan is at that time, this is this is the one that you're really getting. You're assuming the whole mortgage, which means that which is kind of nice too, right? You're
Sure.
getting
Yeah.
down you're now at 27 years and it's not even a 30-year mortgage left for you. So not
Exactly.
a bad deal. Well, Josh, last words. Let's talk about last words. If somebody is really considering out there in the marketplace, maybe moving up, maybe they have some money from family that can help them with down payment, where would you have them start trying to find a home for a VA assumable loan?
First thing is first, make sure you're working with a good realtor. They're going to be the folks
You.
to help you out. Good realtor and a lender. If you've worked with a lender previously, they can help you out through this process. But really, it's going to be the realtor that you're going to be working with to understand the process and help you understand those questions that come with this assumable loan process, because it can get kind of iffy. There's a lot of factors that come into play, and there's a lot of questions, especially in this newer process that hasn't been so common in the past few years. So that'll be my biggest tip.
Yeah, and I love it, Josh, because of the work ethic, getting down and doing all the details, knowing the details, number one, and that's someone like you that's going to go in, fight for the client, find the properties, make the phone calls, and then at the same time, having gone through it, the experience that you have just getting through that process can really help someone fight through it. You know who to talk to, you know the terms, you know what's going on. And it will be interesting to see how many of these pop up, because I think they will more and more be very prevalent in this market. And it's kind of a niche. And I think, Josh, you've got such a great way about yourself and you just love people. And I think you're going to help a lot of people. So anyways, Josh, thanks so much for joining us on Nobody Wants a Mortgage. If you like this video, please share, like, subscribe. And we'll see you next time on Nobody Wants a Mortgage.
Thanks,
Bye,
Bill. Thanks
everybody.
for having me.
Bye.
We'll see you.